Hey everybody, the AMO50 here once again, after a bit of a hiatus. I've been doing alright. I actually have my second episode of the Tokusatsu TARDIS planned on coming out around Valentine's week, which is good for me because that's an episode I've been meaning to get out for a very long time. I was planning on getting it out on December. I was planning on getting this. What I was planning on reviewing was the original Kamen Rider 1 episode, but seeing as how I can't seem to find a copy of that, I'm going to instead be reviewing the Kamen Rider Force episode, the first episode of that series. But what I wanted to come on for right now and talk about really was upcoming Wrestlemania. WrestleMania 28. WrestleMania is so huge that they planned one of the biggest main events in its history out a year in advance. And I know that behind the scenes and whatnot, they do planning things out in advance all the time, but for the fans who usually don't have any insight into the backstage stuff, this gives them an entire year to build it up, and we're almost at the very brink of what this is going to be. A year's worth of waiting, anticipation, and culmination, and now we have the entirety of this year of pent-up energy just culminating. And if you don't know to what match I am referring to, I of course am referring to The Rock versus John Cena. A dream match in the making that many fans thought would never happen. Now, let's go ahead and get two very important things out of the way. This is not going to be a Mark review where I stay like like John Cena and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, actually hate each other in real life. I'm pretty certain that these two are at least on good speaking terms if they're willing to work this out in the ring. And really, these guys, John Cena was coming in at the time The Rock was kind of on the way out, for lack of a better term. But The Rock, let's just break this down. The second thing I wanted to say was that this isn't really going to be a prediction so much. It's just where I think it's heading at the moment. Now, I'm going to avoid talking about any other WrestleMania matches because really this is going to be the real big one. Now, granted, I'm looking forward to Undertaker versus whoever he's facing, possibly Triple H, but I'm still thinking to myself that the Rock and Cena match is what's going to bring in a lot more people because The Rock and Cena both are movie stars to varying degrees, I will admit, and their movies range in quality rather sharply across the board, with some being okay, others being pretty good, and, well, even more being unwatchable by some people. But that's besides the point. It should be noted, too, that both of these guys are still in great physical condition. You look at both of these athletes, and these guys could easily, if possible, probably go for Olympic-level sports if they chose. Now, I'm going to go ahead and break this down. First, we're going to talk about each individual wrestler, and then I'm going to get into, from there, what I think is going to happen in the event itself. Alright, so, on to the individual wrestlers. We have on the one side, John Cena. Now, if anyone who's been following the wrestling world for the past couple of years has been able to see, and very vocally hear from most cases, is that Cena has a very, shall we say, divided opinion. There's a lot of diverse mix of opinion, and with the advent of the internet, a lot more people have been able to express their opinions differently. But even so, in the arenas itself, in the live shows, we're hearing audible chants of Cena sucks from the crowd. In fact, oftentimes when Cena's in a match, there's a dueling chant going on, where one half of the audience will shout, "Let's go Cena," and the other half shouting, "Cena sucks." Personally, I have nothing against John Cena. As a matter of fact, I actually kind of like the guy. Granted, you may think he's phony and whatnot. I personally do not think so. Because, let me just break this down exactly why. Okay, John Cena, for lack of a better term, is pretty much the poster boy for what you would want for an organization. Any organization. Let's say he wasn't quite as physically strong or whatnot. Let's say he was to be a mental thinker, a giant as such. If he were to be in a business position, in full-on business incorporated and whatnot, if he were to be in any type of managerial position with the kind of drive that he has for physical fitness and being in the ring and wrestling, if he was in a business position with that same quality, just focused in more of a business perspective rather than a physical one, he would probably be a CEO or, even better yet, a head forerunner in any industry he should so choose, if you were to extrapolate that out. Because he always shows up. Whenever he can't show up, it's because he's either having a short break, and they're always fairly short, or because he's out due to injury. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but John has only had 2 major injuries during the course of his WWE career. And one of them, and both of them actually, were threatening injuries to his career, and he bounced back from them quicker than most people could even imagine. Let's just look at the numbers here. He bounced back from a torn pectoral muscle, which is nothing to sneeze at, and that can potentially be very deadly. If he literally tore it completely off the shoulder. And that can end your career right there. But he managed to heal up and come back, and he's worked a lot better on it now. And then you also have the issue with his broken neck. And a broken neck is by no means a small problem. There's all sorts of problems that could arise from it. If you know anything about Edge had a broken neck at one point and had to have special surgery in order to have his esophagus and his windpipe realigned as part of the surgery. And eventually, due to several other things that culminated, and that, he eventually contracted a condition that was pretty much a cumulative effort from both the injuries he had sustained and that one particular injury to his neck that forced him to retire as the World Heavyweight Champion. Not a bad way to go out, I must admit, but he knew that he was going to have to eventually retire, and probably due to that neck injury, and he made his peace with it. But John broke his neck, and he's probably eventually going to have to come to the same reality, I'm guessing. But I'm not sure if the breaks in their neck were exactly the same. I'm getting off on a small tangent here. What I want to say about Cena is that I personally enjoy the fact that Cena's out there every week, because that shows dedication. He's out there every week and probably several times a week in house shows where we can't see him on live TV. He's out there every week. He's performing live for people. He's putting his body in harm's risk. Everyone in the wrestling industry is, but that's another point. He's putting himself at harm's risk every time he goes out there and risking another injury that could potentially put him in a wheelchair. And he's going out there and he's performing every night for people who are paying good hard money to see him perform. Whether they love him or they hate him, they're going to come and pay to see him perform. Or see who he's performing against or with, and see how it works. What basically John Cena is he's what you want in a wrestler. He's strong, he has a lot of charisma, he has a lot of ability to talk, and he also has a very, very, shall we say, he hits a chord with people. There's just that X factor. Whether you love him or hate him, you have to admit, there's just something about John Cena that just, you don't know, even if you want to see his face get punched in, you're not going to stop watching getting his face punched in once it starts getting punched in, no matter who it is. And if you like him in a good sense, and you want to see him win, you're not going to stop watching him until he wins, unless you just get bored really easy, which, who knows. But this is also another thing. He's very big on charity events. He goes to a lot of different charities, a lot of different events as such. He has made more Make-A-Wish Foundation wishes than any other person in history. He has done multiple interviews with various companies and news various news outlets, and that's good for the business at large because he's raising public awareness of those who may not be as familiar with wrestling outside of the primary demographic, and thus, if only a little bit, bringing new people into the fold and potentially making them into fans as well. Long-term, short-term, doesn't matter. They're still fans, and they may come back to it if they've left. And another thing that you really have to look at it is, not only is he consistent with his dates, he always makes his matches. I should say that differently. He always comes to the matches that he's supposed to be at. He never skips a match, a la Ultimate Warrior here. He, works with just about everybody who he's asked to work with. And from what we can tell, there's no real complaints. He doesn't whine and moan and get all pissy about it like, a certain immortal. And on top of all that, he's pretty good about making fun of himself if necessary, even if it's only part of character. But I think that a lot of what John's doing is a lot of what he's just himself amped up on screen. So all of that you see on screen is really just an extrapolation of what you're seeing from the real him. But I could go on and on about this. The point is that I think that John is a great... He's not the most technically sound wrestler, not by a long shot, but neither were Hogan or The Ultimate Warrior or, I don't know, Steve Austin. None of them were quite the technical masters of the ring, but they had that undefinable presence and aura about them that just made them so captivating that you wanted to watch them. Whether they were getting their face bashed in or whether they were just going out there and doing what they do best, these guys, they all had the X factor that made people want to see them out there, whether it was for good or for ill. And John has that in spades and then some. And to be completely honest with you, I think that John Cena is here to stay for a long time. You may not like that fact, but you kind of have to accept it as it is. If you don't, well, you're probably going to be disappointed, because I think John's here to stay for a good while yet. Whether he's going to have the championship again anytime soon, up in the air, really. But, que sera. Then we move on to the other huge person with X Factor, The Rock. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This guy was around in the Attitude Era. This guy helped pave the way in the Attitude Era. This guy has not been in matches consecutively for, I don't know, about 8 years. The last time we saw him in a match was at Survivor Series 2011, and before that, the only real things we saw of him, the only real matches we saw out of him were back in 2004. And the occasional cameo appearance via satellite and video clips and whatever, occasionally. And let's be perfectly honest, those were sporadic at best. Granted, some of the movies, like I said earlier, The Rock made, some were pretty good, some were middle of the road, okay, and some, well, the less said about those in the latter category, the better. But say what you will about him not being in the spotlight, in the wrestling spotlight that is, for so long. Dwayne is he is an all-around wrestling talent. Now, I have to give props to Dwayne. Whereas Cena is more of a physical powerhouse, being able to lift the Big Show on your shoulders, just no small feat after all, and not only that, being able to power slam him effectively, that's, again, no small feat in any stretch of the imagination. But The Rock has a lot more, I'd say, physical talent in terms of ring coordination. Not necessarily that he's more agile, but simply that he has a lot more moves at his disposal. He has a lot more tricks up his sleeve. Then again, The Rock comes from a time in wrestling where every single wrestler had to be very flamboyant, very iconic, and very unique. And they either did this through being physically capable of pulling off numerous feats, which were found very easily in Owen Hart and Bret Hart. May Owen rest in peace. Or you could have it in a great, intimidating physical persona, which The Undertaker and Kane had in spades. But be perfectly fair here, Undertaker and Kane, to varying degrees, both had great physical ability as well. Not necessarily the most technical Kane, but Undertaker himself, great. One of the greatest super heavyweights of all time. In fact, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, if not the best. And no offense to HBK, but, 19-0, maybe 20-0, but anyway. And when The Rock was coming up in wrestling, the atmosphere was changing. It was constantly turbulent and tumultuous. A lot of what the people remember about The Rock aren't necessarily the matches he had, though he did have some great ones, one of the most highlights of which being WrestleMania 18, him against Hulk Hogan. That was another dream match that many people thought was never going to happen, and it happened. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But the matches that Rock had, not always... It may have just been because The Rock never had really anybody who could quite keep up with him in the ring, but that wasn't always the case. The Rock was a great wrestler, technically, and he also was great on the microphone. Everyone remembers all of his catchphrases. If you were around in the Attitude Era and you saw The Rock on screen, you stopped, you listened, and you paid dang well attention to that. You did not stop. You did not change the channel as long as Rock was on the screen. You knew something was going to happen. And that's that X Factor again. Whether he was getting beat up, whether he was acting the heel and you wanted to see him get punched in the face, or whether he was the good guy and you wanted to see him punch other people in the face as hard as he could, you still couldn't brighten your eyes off of him and you wanted to see more. And The Rock was great for that. But a lot of what we remember about The Rock was his skill on the mic. And that charisma, that God-given charisma, for lack of a better term. And if you don't believe in God, well, let's just say he was gifted with incredible charisma, let's say. And that charisma was part of his appeal. Not to say that The Rock couldn't hold his own in the ring, far from it. He could hold his own with just about everybody. But basically, where I'm coming from with this is that The Rock, having not been in the ring for so long, it's kind of diluted people's thoughts about him. Granted, he was never a bad wrestler by any stretch of the imagination. But there's a chance that he may have been just a tad bit overhyped because of the charged atmosphere of the Attitude Era. Now, this isn't to say that The Rock didn't deserve all the praise that he got, or the championships, but by no means. But let's be perfectly fair here. The Rock is still a very good showman. But since he hasn't been really in any major wrestling matches until SummerSlam recently, not SummerSlam, who am I talking about? Survivor Series, can't even talk today. In Survivor Series was the first time we saw him back, and he still had all the old tricks. But, that only goes so far. A lot of what people are remembering about him is being filtered through the nostalgia goggles, and it's being amplified. Not to say that it wasn't great while he was around, and while he is around now. He's always going to be great, but how much of what we remember is what we want to remember, and how much of it is what we want to repress? Just saying. Again, this is by no means saying that Rock was ever doing anything horrible. By no means, but he did have one or two rough patches in his career, let's say. And being completely honest with you, I honestly kind of wish he had stayed on to wrestle more through the 2000s. I wish that, but you get what you get. And I love the fact that he's come back to challenge Cena. And this kind of leads into my thoughts about the WrestleMania 18 I said we were going to talk about later. WrestleMania 18, Rock versus Hogan. Two of the biggest icons of their respective ages. The golden age of wrestling, as it was pretty much called, and which was Hogan's domain. The era which Hogan ruled over, which pretty much went up until he switched over to WCW and became part of the NWO eventually. But that's another story for another day. And about that time, when WCW was forming NWO, Rock came into the WWE. And if anybody's seen that Survivor Series thing of him in '96, he didn't look almost anything like he does today. No tattoos, no real catchphrases. He had that, I'd call them tassels. But Rock didn't really have, besides the kind of goofy outfit, he didn't really have a whole lot of things besides the physique and the athletic ability. But over time, he picked up steam. And eventually, he became one of, if not the biggest stars of the Attitude Era. Rivaling and possibly surpassing, at least at one point, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who, to this day, is still considered one of the absolute greatest WWE champions of all time. But it still can't take away from the fact that Rock and Hogan going one-on-one was one of the biggest matches of all time. It was so hyped up, and it was done so fluidly, perfectly well. Both guys went out there, one being the face, The Rock, the other being the heel, Hogan. And by the end of the match, both men were being cheered equally as faces, which almost never happens in this day and age. But if there's any one thing that you should take away from this, it's that the match, despite the fact that Rock vs. Hogan ended with the younger man winning, the match still made both men look great. And Hogan, let's be perfectly honest, never was quite that well in the ring, physically speaking. He could hold his own, but let's just be honest, he wasn't always the best. but he could hold his own in the ring when he had to, and Rock managed to kind of help him along a bit, I'd say. But Hogan had a few tricks up his sleeve as well. Anyway, WrestleMania 18, 10 years previous, about now, set the standard for how dream matches should be. You have both guys going out there, the oldie but goodie versus the new blood, one of which is remembered for the feats of yesteryear, and one of which is still rising. Still rising and still eventually possibly eclipsing the oldie but goodie. Yet, if both of them come out looking good, not necessarily as faces, mind you, but if both of them come out looking great, like they did, that does wonders. Hogan got a huge spike in becoming a good guy again. And if you remember, he had a great run until the end of 2005, 2006. Right about that area. And let's be perfectly fair here. Both those men, they went out there and they tore it up. But with a match like that, you have to use that as an ID here. That match is a basis for what we're going to be seeing at 28. Rock versus Cena. Potentially what they could do is where the current Kane angle with Cena is going, where he's embracing the hate. Cena may still remain a face, but he becomes a little bit more ruthless. More like an Attitude Era star. He's still a good guy, but he's doing things more ruthlessly. He's becoming more brash and outspoken and confident, which he already is a pretty fair amount, so I don't know. But Cena and Rock going at it is going to be just like Hogan and Rock. The only difference is that the roles of oldie but goodie now fall on The Rock. The feats of yesteryear versus the feats of the modern competitor. Now you'll notice when I did Rock and Hogan, yesteryear down here, Rock up here. Here I put them at about level, because that's where I am about now. I honestly don't know who's going to win, and if they put over Rock, that's going to be wonderful. It's going to be a nostalgia trip. But the problem with that immediately arises is that Rock really, unless he returns to full time, this is really only going to affect so much. But if Cena wins, it's going to propel him to huge heights and potentially make him even more hated by fans, because he'll have taken down The Rock. The way to get around this, I believe, is if they do what they did in 18 and make both guys look great. Both guys go out there, they do their thing, maybe half and half chance, and at the end, both of them wind up doing so many amazing things in the ring that people just can't help but cheer. And whichever one wins, they're cheering, the fans are cheering for both of them. Now granted, some people seem to have a predisposition towards hating Cena, and some people have a predisposition towards not liking The Rock. All fine and dandy. You have your right to your opinion. But I really think that that's the best thing we can expect out of this. Now, who do I personally think is going to win? Like I said, I can't really gauge it right now. If I were to do it, if I were to book it, I'd book it like they did in 18. Predictable, yes, but with good reason. It works. If done right, it works. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I sit on this. If you're going to have a dream match like this, make it to where both guys end up looking great. Not good, great. And that's going to be what's going to get people to watch the match, to keep watching the match, and to come back for more. Because if both guys look great, then Rock has momentum. If he wants to continue in wrestling and go into continue in movies, or if he just wants to quit the movies and come back to wrestling full time, that's going to be a big boost for him. And Cena is still going to be keeping on with wrestling and the occasional movie here and there. Less said about that, the better. But that's going to be a huge build-up for Cena. And if they make Rock look good in the process, maybe some of the fan heat will lessen just a tad bit. But this is all speculation, keep in mind. So, thank you for listening to my ramblings. Hope you enjoyed my insights into this matter. Please say in the comment section below what you want to say. I know a good portion of you are going to probably post Cena sucks or various Rock quotes. Whatever. You know, I just made this to put my cards out on the table, as it were. Just put my cards out on the table and let everybody see, you know, this is where I stand. This is my story, I'm sticking to it. So, if you have a problem with what I said, or with how I said it, I'll find an end. You're open to your opinion, I'm open to mine. Just try to be nice about it, okay? Don't be mean for the sake of being mean, okay? Anyway, so yeah, looking forward to WrestleMania, and I can't wait. There are no words. There are absolutely no words to describe how much this WrestleMania is going to be great. It's shaping up to be an absolutely wonderful year, and the only other thing I can say about this is whoever Taker's up against, 20-0, baby. 20-0. Let's go for the big 2-0. Anyway, I gotta sign off. This is the MMO50 signing out. See you guys later. Bye-bye.